modify your camera so I can be able to.
Good. Careful.
And I'm over
Okay.
here, right? How's that for
Can you
highlights?
see?
I believe it's
Bill?
good. Okay, go ahead and mark it.
Okay. Orson Swindle, B-roll, take 4.
So Orson, we'll talk here. You'll
Okay.
address me here. So tell me about the objects in front of you.
This is the most beautiful thing in the world. This is an F8 Echo model, Crusader, made by, I guess it's called Ling Timco Vought. That may be wrong. I think it's just Vought aircraft. It was a supersonic aircraft. It would go about 1,200 miles an hour, if I remember correctly. I think I had it up over 1,000, but that scared the heck out of me, so I pulled the throttle back. But it was very fast. It was designed to be an interceptor for the Navy operating off of carriers, and we had a model that came along several years later, about 7 or 8 years later, I guess, and they had put wing stations on. You don't see them here, but we could hang bombs on the aircraft. So we took it to Vietnam and got there 1st February of 1966. And our mission was close air support for Marine infantry, dropping bombs, strafing. It had 4 cannons on it, 400 rounds of 20 millimeter ammunition. Would carry a pod of rockets on either side, which gave it a bunch of rockets. And then on the shoulders of it, this area up here, it had rails that would carry, I think, 8 5-inch rockets. So with all that kind of stuff, he'd carry 2,000-pound bombs, 1 on each side. With all that stuff, you could do a lot of damage, but you couldn't waste much time doing it because you run out of fuel. It was a short-legged aircraft for that mission. I started flying it in December of 1964 and got shot down on the 11th of November 1966, so I came up just a few months short of 2 years, and I logged over 600 hours in it. I've forgotten now, but flew 204 missions, maybe 203 and a half, because I didn't make it back home on the last one, and did okay. It's a good airplane. I enjoyed it. This is a picture of me when I just started flying it. I was just looking at this picture. It's the only one I have of me on the airplane or in the airplane. And it was taken in 1965, the summer, I believe, and probably taken by one of those little Instamatic cameras you could buy, and you bought it and then turned the camera in and they gave you your film back or something, I forgot. And it's just really a crude thing, but that's the way I looked back then.
Can you hold it still for just a second?
Sure.
Show it to me? Yeah, that's good. Hold it there just a sec. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Good. But it was a lot of fun. I remember I started flying it in December of 1964. Is that right? Yeah, 64. And it has about 18,000 pounds of thrust when it's really ginning. And as the temperature gets colder, you get more power out of the engines. And the first time I flew it, it was actually the second time I flew it. First time I flew it, I didn't use afterburner. Took off regular. Second time I took off that day was in afterburner, and the temperature was 20 degrees, if I remember correctly, down in the 20s. And when I hit the afterburner thing, I thought I had about 14 Great Dane dogs on leashes pulling me down the runway. I didn't think I'd ever catch up with the airplane. I mean, it was going like a bat out of hell, and it was quite a thrill. It was a lot of fun to fly.
Tell me about that cup.
This cup is one that we have, POWs have reunions every couple of years or every year now as our numbers dwindle. And this happened to be the anniversary of our 40 years of freedom. And it was at the Nixon Library. That's the POW flag you see flying everywhere. Although, interestingly, on this one, because we chose to do it this way, it upset some people. The one you see flying over government buildings has the POW with his head out. And we said, enough of that. We're looking up. It's different. And this was at the Richard Nixon Library, and CBS, I believe, did a really nice documentary of that event. And this is in 2013, and that video circulates every year at least once as if it was new. and I've seen it countless times. But that was a great reunion, and we, as you might expect, thought a lot of President Nixon because he bombed the hell out of North Vietnam, and put the B-52s on them, and that, I think, led to our release. Unfortunately, the settlement they worked out didn't work out too well, but you know, he was held with a lot of affection, and we met him on that occasion. Well, when our reunion, we met him when we came home because he had us all up at the White House, a huge gala, out on the lawn, the back lawn of the White House, and it poured down rain. We had to walk out to these pavilion tents on what do you call it? Pallets. They put pallets down. We could walk. We were all in dress uniforms and everything, just pouring down rain. But it was a great party, and Lord, we had John Wayne and Bob Hope and Red Skelton and I'm trying to think of some of the other people. Urban Berlin, who wrote "God Bless America," and you know, we all sang that, and everybody was in tears by the time it was over, and we all got to go up and speak to President Nixon, and we'd had time in the White House where we were given free reign in the White House, just go anywhere you want to go, and we looked all over the White House, and it was a very special occasion. And then we had, when he resigned from the presidency, he went to Casa Pacifica, which is out near Camp Pendleton in California, and John McCain and I were actually working on this thing, as I recall, the planning committee for this reunion, and he and I got talking about President Nixon. Said, "But you know, we ought to invite him to this. We're going to have this thing in L.A., and we'll just invite him to come up and visit with us." And then we both looked at each other and said, "How do we do that?" Had no idea. So it occurred to me that one of my basic school friends, who were best friends today, Jack Brennan, was the president's Marine aide. And I called Jack and I said, "Jack, this is Orson. We're thinking about having President Nixon come to LA to be with us at our reunion." He had just been in exile a short period of time, or that's my word, exile. And you know, it was not happy times for him, and he always loved us, so we figured this might be good. And Jack said, "I'll go talk to the old man about that." And he called back about an hour, very short time later. He said, "The president says he's got a better idea. We'll get buses, and you guys all come down to Casa Pacifica," because Mrs. Nixon she had a cold or something, and she couldn't travel. And so we all went down there, and we spent the whole day there, and I sat down with about 3 or 4 other guys, and we talked to President Nixon, asked him questions about foreign policy. He was like an encyclopedia. He really knew his stuff. He just, you know, I guess you could say he came up a little short in a personal relations with people, but we were very fond of him.
One final question, sir. At a certain point, you became aware that people at home were wearing bracelets, some
Yep.
with your name on it. What did that mean to you?
It was very meaningful, and there have been spectacular things done with them. There is a display in, of all places, Palm Springs, California airport, of POW bracelets. Every POW has some kind of a sculpture made of it. But you know, after you've been there for 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 years, you begin to wonder. And we weren't getting a lot of information, as you well can imagine. And I've forgotten how we heard about the bracelets. If the Vietnamese let it out, I'm sure did it inadvertently. They just didn't realize the impact, symbology of it. But it really made us feel a lot better that maybe we weren't forgotten, because it was the beginning. You know, they quit bombing up. Johnson quit bombing in '68, and we got home in '73. So without the bombing, what's happening? All we can hear is the propaganda from the radio, and that was never good. I mean, you know, I used to have a rule when they were giving us, when we were flying missions up there, and we'd hear about them shooting down airplanes, and I'd say, divide every number you hear by pi. And that might be close to reality, but the bracelet thing was a very special thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, we will cut and get out of your hair.
Okay.
5 minutes to be
Cut.
honorable.
Was our volume working? You had it turned on? You
Yeah.
peek-
Yes,
okay.
it was turned on,
Okay.
yeah.